Alright, so I realized as I was editing this video that I never really gave an introduction as to who I am, so I'm here to do that now. My name is Randy, and I'm a 22-year-old poker player from mid-Michigan. I was introduced to poker around 3.5 years ago, and ever since then I've fallen in love with the game, and I've devoted myself to studying and improving as much as I can to become the best player that I possibly can be. I'm excited to start this journey with you guys though, and hopefully we can build up a great community of people. So with that being said, let's get to what you guys came here for. Let's get into the poker. We arrive at the poker room and get seated in the 2-5 game. We head over to the cage and buy $2,000 worth of chips and take our seat. The max buy-in for this game is $1,000, so we put the extra 10 black in our pocket in case we need to reload.
There's my 8 guys. Taylor 20, JKK, Jeff, BAB, Zambi, Calci, Shirzan, Sam.
We pick up a couple of smaller pots before we look down at our first official hand of the vlog, red pocket queens in the small blind. There's a $10 straddle, the middle position player limps, the cutoff puts in a raise to $40, and it folds to us. We're definitely going to be putting in a 3-bet here, so we put in the raise to $120. The limper cold calls, and the original raiser also calls. The flop is King 9 deuce with 2 diamonds, so not the best flop in the world to see with our queens. We check, hoping that it just checks around, but the limper decides to put in a bet to $200. The original raiser folds, and now back to us. We have a pretty easy fold here. I'm fortunate to have queens and face a bet on this board from a passive player, but really, what are you going to do? We throw our cards into the muck, and the limper shows us the king of spades. This was a player who had also previously limped ace-king, so it wouldn't surprise me if he had that here as well. I had wanted to step outside the room to talk about a few hands in a Jamin Burton style mid-session update. However, I'm still getting used to the whole vlogging thing, and I was a little camera shy filming in front of other people. However, I was able to get one good hand recap, so I'll let you guys listen to my breakdown of the hand just after I had stepped outside the room to record this. So there's a $10 button straddle. We are under the gun. We're going to make it 35 to go with Queen Jack of diamonds. Folds around to the cutoff. Cutoff decides here to raise it up. He's going to put in a 3-bet to 120. It folds back to me, and I think that we can end up making a call here. We're both playing about $1,000 deep, so make the call we do. Heads up to a flop. We're going to be looking at ace of spades, king of spades, 5 of diamonds. I check, and our opponent pretty quickly checks back. The turn is the 3 of diamonds, now giving us a flush draw in addition to the gut shot we already have. So we're going to put in a bet here. We decide to go on a little bit of the larger sizing. We bet $170 to pretty much set up a bluff river shove. And our opponent tanks for a little bit, cuts out some chips, looks down at his stack, and then decides on making a call. River's going to be a pretty good one for us here. River's going to be the 10 of spades, so we end up rivering a straight. However, the front door flush does come in. Not that worried, though, that our opponent has a flush. I believe that most of those flush draws are going to be betting the flop. So we decide on pretty much the only sizing available to us. We shove all in for around $700 effective, and our opponent pretty quickly makes the call. We end up showing our straight, and our opponent actually shows us ace-king of diamonds for a flop 2 pair with a backdoor flush draw that turned a flush draw that checked the flop and then ended up flatting us on the turn. So we end up hitting a 3-outer here, getting pretty lucky, sitting on a pretty decent stack right now. After that last hand, we decide to head on over to Breeze Food Court for our dinner break and grab a Detroit-style Coney dog from National Coney Island with our comp dollars. We return from our dinner break and fold a couple of orbits before looking down at King Queen of clubs on the button. Under the gun and low jack limp, so we put in a raise sizing up a bit here to $25. The small blind pretty quickly puts in a 3-bet to $90, and the big blind and limpers fold. This is a pretty slam dunk call for us in this spot, so we go heads up to a flop of 8-4-4 rainbow. The small blind goes for a very small sizing of $35, which he'll be doing here with his entire range. With our 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw, we decide to float and see a very nice looking king of hearts on the turn, completing the rainbow. The small blind now bets $105. This turn smashes his perceived range. However, with us turning top pair and now only losing to pocket aces, ace-king, and pocket eights, we have a mandatory call here. The river is the 10 of diamonds, a pretty clean brick. The small blind now slows down and checks, and I go into the tank for around 30 seconds and ultimately decide to check it back. I really don't know why I checked here, and I really don't like this check, considering his hands that have us beat are always going to be going for value on this river, and we can try to squeeze out some value from jacks, queens, nines, and even some ace-high hands that could possibly try to hero us off. The small blind shows us ace-jack of clubs, and we turn over the king-queen to scoop a pretty decent pot. For these next two hands, I unfortunately wasn't able to get any footage of them, however I still think it's important to include them here. The first one is kind of silly and we get a little out of line in this one. There's a $10 button straddle and we look down at Jack 10 offsuit in the big blind. In Michigan, when there's a button straddle, the action starts in the small blind and continues in flow to the button, who then has their option. I really hate how much pressure this puts on the blinds, which is why I don't like button straddles here. However, that's a talk for another time. We complete the $10 and it folds to the button, who puts in a raise to $50. With $10 already in the pot, we decide to get a little splashy and make the call out of position. The flop comes 9-7-5 rainbow. I check and he quickly checks it back. Not a huge surprise given how hard this board smashes my range. The turn is the 9 of diamonds, now putting a flush draw out there, and we decide to lead for $40. This turn is great for our range, and betting here denies equity to all the overcard hands which have us dominated. The button calls and we go to an 8 of spades river, bricking the flush draw and now giving us a straight. I decide to pull here and make a pretty sizable overbet to $235, looking to get heroed off. Our opponent throws his head back in disgust and goes deep into the tank, for around a minute and a half almost. He pulls out $235 in chips, but ultimately looks back at his cards and slowly slides them into the muck. Unfortunate that we weren't able to get some value there, but we can't complain about taking down a pot which we had no business being in the first place. The next hand, there's an open over a limp to $25 from the cutoff, and we look down at ace jack of spades on the button and put in a pretty standard 3-bet to $85. The blinds fold as well as the limper, and the cutoff makes the call. The flop comes down 10-3 deuce with 2 clubs. Our opponent decides to donk lead for $35, and this is a spot where we can use our range advantage to attack him and blow him off his hand. Donk leads like this are usually pretty indicative of a weak holding, usually pocket pairs smaller than the top card on the board, or a weak top pair that wants to see a cheap turn. Ace jack of spades is a pretty good candidate to raise here as well, given that we have pretty easy barrels on the turn. Given our opponent would only have around $300 behind if we got called after raising the flop, we can just be all in on any spade or an ace. With all that being said, we decide to put in a raise here to $130, and our opponent angrily sighs and throws his cards back to the dealer. We look down at a premium hand next after it folds to us in the cutoff with black kings. We raise to $15, the good old triple nickel, and the small blind and big blind call. The flop is queen 10-3 with 2 hearts. It checks to us and we put in a bet of $30, and only the big blind makes the call. The turn comes the jack of spades. When the opponent checks to us, we elect for a bet of $85. Even though this turn completes a lot of the 2 pairs that our opponent calls the flop with, we still have a pretty expansive value target. The river is an offsuit 5, a total brick, and when our opponent checks to us, we decide to check it back, considering that we are essentially only getting called by better if we put in a bet in this spot. Our opponent turns over ace 5 of hearts, so we end up scooping this one as well. Alright guys, for the last hand of the vlog, we have another hand from the cutoff, this time with pocket 10s. We raise to 15 after it folds to us, and we get calls from the button, small blind, and big blind. 4 ways to a flop of 8-7-3 rain, and when it checks to us, we put in a bet of $25. The button folds to us, and the small blind, a pretty drunk recreational player, min clicks it back to us, making it $50 to go. The big blind folds, and I decide to make the call. At the time, I had no idea what this guy could have here, besides a value hand such as a set or top 2 pair. However, getting such a cheap price to peel a turn, we have to make this call. Pause the video and leave a comment down below letting me know what you think the small blind could have in this spot. The turn comes the 9 of clubs, and now the small blind decides to check it over to us. I'm pretty much at a loss here, as now this hand just makes 0 sense, but I decide to nonetheless put in a bet to the tune of $130, planning to fold to a check raise, and the small blind calls fairly quickly. The river is the 7 of spades, and now when our opponent checks to us again, I decide to just play it safe and get to showdown, where our opponent shows us 7-5 offsuit. Out of all the hands my opponent could have had in this spot, I definitely did not put him on this one. Pretty unlucky river card for us, and this one's going to be going over to our opponent. After the pocket 10s hand, we play a few more before noticing the table starts to die down and the wrecks are heading home for the night. We rack up and head to the cage, booking a win on the session after just over 4.5 hours of play. Alright guys, so just wrapped up the session here. Kind of got a little bit out of line with that last Jack 10 offsuit hand that I played, but hey, sometimes you just got to be a luck box a little bit. So totals for tonight, we ended up buying in the game for $2,000, cashing out tonight for $33.26. That's a total profit of $1,326. So another good session, looking great, looking good. Been running pretty good too, honestly. Like playing pretty decent, I'd say, but the vlog run good is here, and hopefully it's here to stay.